I know this is no surprise to you, but as the Hoosiers get back into Big Ten play, the most important game is the Purdue matchup.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. It is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you making this your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Well, first of all, Happy New Year, everybody. Hope you are doing well. Hope you had a fantastic holiday with Christmas and everything with that. And then, of course, with the start of the new year. We're in 2024. Isn't that wild to think about already here as we are just a couple of days into the new year? I hope you enjoyed the content throughout the Christmas and New Year kind of a break there. I had some stuff recorded for you guys, and I really hope that you enjoyed that. But last day that I'll be here at my parents', I'll be back in the home setup after that. So we'll get back to everything being normal on the video, audio side of things. But I do appreciate you sticking with us here as we are continuing to put out content on the road. If you are new here, thank you so much for tuning in here at the start of the new year. Would love for you to become part of the family here. You can drop a subscribe. Just hit the button on YouTube. It's free. You don't have to do anything else with it, right? It's free, and you can follow us when we post episodes each and every day. You can also subscribe on your audio platforms as well, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcast. We're climbing up to 1,600 subscribers, so if you're not one of those, please try to do that for us. We would really, really appreciate that. But Indiana basketball getting started back up into Big Ten play, and now we know there's some big games coming up for the Hoosiers. It's going to be tough. There's no doubt. And I don't have to remind you this. You know the answer to this question. What's the most important game in the Big Ten schedule? It's the Purdue matchup, and we know that. But today I'm going to give you the 5 biggest, most important games of the Big Ten schedule. We know we've already got 2 in the bag, right? We've already played 2, but I'm going to give you the 5 most important remaining Big Ten games kind of when you start looking at March and the NCAA tournament, which is crazy. I know it's crazy to start thinking about that, but it's right around the corner. So with that, the first game, and I already said it, it's the Purdue game. And I'm not talking about the one at Purdue. That's not any fun. I'm talking about the game at home versus Purdue here in Bloomington at Assembly Hall coming up later on in the season, right? It's coming up here in the next few weeks. It's on January 16th. That's the game that we're all looking forward to. Purdue's still the number 1 team in the country. They're playing really well, but we know what it means for the Indiana and Purdue rivalry. I mean, it's a big, big deal. We know that. But this game itself is so big because, look, Purdue's a really good team, all right? They're number 1 in the country for a reason, and given kind of what they're going to do to start their Big Ten schedule, I would think that by the time they come to Bloomington, they would also still be the number 1 team in the country. Their only loss was to Northwestern. Remember that? They lost to Northwestern a while back. They do have to play Illinois, who as of now, as of the newest AP poll, is up to number 9 in the country. We'll talk about that coming up in a little bit as well. But just looking at who they play, Maryland, Illinois, Nebraska, and Penn State, I don't see any reason outside that Illinois game that Purdue won't be number 1 in the country when they come and play us in Assembly Hall. Think about the opportunity that Indiana has in that game to get a signature win. We know they're coming off of wrapping up non-con play with the nice big win over Kennesaw State, dropping 100 points. That was nice to see. For Indiana offensively, of course, Malik Reneau having a career day once again. He's starting to get into the habit of doing that, so we love seeing that. But Indiana should feel good about themselves going into that game because between now and then, you're on the road at Nebraska, home for Ohio State, at Rutgers, and home versus Minnesota. You should have a pretty good streak going there before Purdue comes to town. And then if you have the opportunity on your home floor to take down the number 1 team in the country and get the big signature win that you've been looking for, that would be huge. And so that's why I say outside of the rivalry between us and Purdue, right? Outside of just the hatred that's already there, just looking at the number one team in the country coming to your house and you get to play them twice, you got to go there too. But man, what a big opportunity that would be for Indiana. So that's why I put the Purdue game at number one as the most important remaining Big Ten game on the schedule. I then go way down the schedule all the way in late February on the 27th. And I go to the home game against Wisconsin. And I say this game, and I put it at number two because right now they're ranked. Okay, they're in the top 25. I would assume they're going to be that way pretty much all year. They may kind of flop in and out, but that's another tough game, but it's at home where you can build your resume some more. And I think Indiana matches up really well with Wisconsin. I do. I think the Hoosiers match up well. I think their size would give them some advantage in that game. But I picked that one, and I have another one down near the end of the schedule as well that we'll talk about. But I picked the Wisconsin game because we hope that they are top 25. And we hope that by the end of February, we have picked up some nice wins and we're kind of cruising along. That's one more good opportunity to get a good win to show the committee, right? To try to get a good seed line because we're 12 right now in the latest bracketology. And I still believe that we're going to climb there and continue to see this team grow in those rankings and in the seed lines for the NCAA tournament. But a win at home late February against Wisconsin, who will be a tournament team, who will be a 4 to 5 seed or even higher. I mean, that's what you want. That's what you are looking for. And really, for me in that game, and look, I know this is a long way away. Believe me, I know this is a long way away. But in that game, it almost is going to tell me, okay, this is what we have for the tournament. This is the team that we're going to have. And who knows what that's going to look like. It could look like what we saw the other night against Kennesaw State. It can look completely different, good or bad. So that's why I put that game at number two, because there's so many factors there. And I really do think that could be a be-all, tell-all type of game for us to see what this Indiana team is going to look like and how they're going to perform when it comes to March in the NCAA tournament. Well, coming up here on this episode, we'll continue talking about the most important games in the Big Ten coming up for Indiana basketball as they are getting back into Big Ten play at the start of the new year. We'll give you 3 and 4, also the fifth one as well to round out the top 5 and kind of looking ahead at what's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks for Indiana basketball. So that's all coming up here on today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is easy to use, and there are many different ways for you to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That's my favorite thing to do. The best way to find popular parlays and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. I appreciate you making this your first listen each and every day, your go-to spot for Indiana basketball and Indiana athletics updates and commentary and just my thoughts and opinions on it. I love when you guys engage with me as well, whether it be on X at Locked On Hoosiers or in the comments on YouTube down below as well. I try to read them. I try to engage when I can, so please do that. It's a lot of fun. I think we're building a really good community here. But as we continue talking about the 5 most important games for Indiana basketball coming up in the Big Ten schedule, I want to remind you, because I think people are forgetting this. The Hoosiers are 2-0 in Big Ten play, right? 2-0 in Big Ten play as you get started here again with the Big Ten. You have your wins over Maryland and Michigan, and then you went through and you played the Auburn game and the Kansas game, and then you played those 3 back-to-back kind of crappier non-conference games, right? But now you're starting to pick back up. You're on the road at Nebraska. We'll have a whole episode tomorrow previewing that game for you as the Hoosiers get back on the road, get back into Big Ten play at Nebraska. But this is an Indiana team that's 2-0 in the conference and 10-3 overall on the season. And so these games that I'm highlighting, they're all important. There's no doubt. They're all important. And they're all necessary for Indiana to compete and try to win. And you're not going to win them all. I mean, A, I don't think Indiana's at that point. And B, the Big Ten's just a really, really good conference this year. And it's really stacked at the top that Indiana's trying to find their way into. But I already mentioned the Purdue game at home and then the Wisconsin game later on in the season at home as well. I'm picking up another home game here, and it's actually the last game of the year, the final regular season game for Indiana men's basketball when you're at home against Michigan State on March 10th. That is a monumental game, and it's one that looked a lot more dangerous to start the year when Michigan State started as a top 4 team in the country. We know what they did to start. They just slid down the hill and kept rolling and couldn't ever catch themselves. But they're starting to come back a little bit. And who knows? Like I was talking about before with Indiana in late February, early March, who knows what this Michigan State team is going to look like 2.5 months from now? I mean, it's going to be interesting to see kind of what they do. And while they beat Baylor in a beatdown, right? And then they turn around and beat Oakland, Stony Brook, and Indiana State. Okay, nothing super crazy there. But Indiana's not going to see them until the last game of the year. And you want to talk about a resume opportunity. What happens if Indiana gets inside the top 25? Or what happens if Michigan State gets back inside the top 25? That's a huge game for both programs to get that final win before you have conference tournaments and then Selection Sunday. And not to mention, it's just a legendary program in Michigan State and a legendary head coach. And another really, really good test for this Indiana team. And it's really hard to judge what this game's going to look like because who knows what these teams will look like. Can teams get healthy, right? Can Indiana get healthy and then stay healthy? Can Michigan State do the same? But that's just going to be a lot of fun. I'm really, really excited about that Michigan State game. I prefer that it wouldn't be the final game of the regular season, but it is what it is. I'm excited about that one. And I do think it's important for this team to get that one final push, right? One final test before you go in front of the committee and you get to the NCAA tournament and all that good stuff. So excited about the Michigan State game. That's number 3 for me. Number 4 is interesting to me. And it's one that I've already mentioned, and it's one that's coming up this week, tomorrow. It's the Nebraska game for me. I put that as a top 4 game in top 5 game remaining in the Big Ten schedule for Indiana, and here's why. You have not played a Big Ten game since you played Michigan 6 games ago, right? That's been a long time since you played that Big Ten game. That was back on December 5th is when you played that. So borderline a month since you played a Big Ten game. You've had a couple of brutal losses, right? The Auburn blowout loss in Atlanta, the heartbreaking loss against Kansas, and then you've kind of beat up on some bad teams. This Nebraska game is tricky because not only are you getting back into Big Ten play, you're doing it on the road in the middle of the week, and you're playing a Nebraska team that's 11-2 overall. You're playing a Nebraska team that's feeling pretty good about themselves that, oh, by the way, has a win over that Michigan State team we just talked about. And they're on a 4-game winning streak going into this one as well. So their only 2 losses were to Minnesota, which is kind of a head scratcher, and then Creighton, who was a top 15 team at the time. This is a scary game. It's scary. And it's one that Indiana absolutely could lose if they don't go and play their best ball. And again, we're going to have a preview episode for this, but this is a very important game to get you back into the swing of things, right? With the holidays and New Year's and traveling and all that mess and classes getting back going. Like, there are so many worrisome things about this game for me and for Indiana that you just don't know. A lot of question marks, right? Because how is this team going to respond? You got the nice win on Friday, but you haven't played a team to your competition level in a couple of weeks. So how do you respond? How do you respond about going on the road? Right? How do you respond about going on the road in the Big Ten to a very good team? We saw what happened against Michigan, right? We were questioning when Indiana went on the road for the very first time of the year when they went to Ann Arbor. That crowd was not anything crazy. It was non-existent, basically. And you had to scrap out a win against a savvy Michigan team. But just for the second time this year, you're on the road again, which I think will be, I hope, I was wrong the first time, but I'm hoping this is a better crowd just for I guess from a viewership standpoint, a basketball fan standpoint. Like, I want it to be a nice crowd, and I think Indiana needs to test for that too. But I think it's going to be a hostile environment on a late Wednesday night tip when everything's just getting back going. A perfect opportunity for you to get another win, get comfortable, get back into the flow of Big Ten play. If you lose, then you've got to try and recover, and you don't have long to do it because you play Ohio State, who is solid. Then you're on the road again at Rutgers. You welcome in Minnesota that next week, and then you hit the gauntlet of Purdue, Wisconsin, and Illinois. So in the next couple of weeks, Nebraska is one of your better chances at a win besides Rutgers, Minnesota. I mean, that's why it's so important to me. And if you lose this, then you got to turn around and try to beat Ohio State on Saturday night. Like, there's a lot going on here. There is. And so I think it's important. I put it in the top 5 for that reason, because you're feeling good, right? You're coming off of a 100-point game where Malik Reneau did his thing, another career high. You've got to be feeling like you can win this game. But what Indiana team's going to show up, right? What coaching performance are we going to see from Mike Woodson? I think that's a legitimate question too. What efforts are we going to see from Indiana? What shooting performance are we going to see from Indiana? Are we going to see this team healthy? Are we going to see guys like Xavier Johnson play? I mean, those are all questions that go into this that really worry me and concern me about Indiana. But man, if you get this win, you just keep on rolling. You just keep on chugging along. And I think you have a lot of confidence when Ohio State comes to your house on Saturday. So I put Nebraska in the top 5 on this list as well. I'm excited for it, though. I am. I'm excited for it. We'll have a preview episode for you. We'll have a reaction episode for you here on Locked On Hoosiers. So excited for that. But I do think, I know it's crazy, but I have it as a top 5 game remaining on the Big Ten schedule for Indiana basketball. Well, coming up, we'll talk about the rest of the games as we're getting into the Big Ten play, plus kind of what it all means and what to expect from this Indiana basketball team as we're kind of getting back going here in the start of the new year as the Hoosiers gear up for the rest of Big Ten play. We'll talk about all that and more coming up here in just a second on Locked On Hoosiers. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. I appreciate you making this your first listen each and every day. Reminder, we're free and available wherever you get your podcast. So whether you're on the video version on YouTube or whether you're listening on audio, wherever you get your podcast, we are free and available to do that. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you hanging out here on this episode here as we're getting into the new week, getting into the new year, and looking at the rest of the Big Ten games for Indiana. I've given you the top 4 that I think are the most important. I've said the home game versus Purdue, the home game versus Wisconsin near the end of the year, late February, the home game against Michigan State at the very end of the season, the last regular season game. And then I just talked about the game coming up tomorrow at Nebraska on a Wednesday night to get back into conference play. Those are all really important. And then you start looking at this schedule, it's not easy. And there's a couple of reasons for that, mainly because the Big Ten's just that good. I mean, this conference, it's always good. It's always competitive. But over the last week or two, man, they've really jumped up. I mean, just look at the rankings right now in the Big Ten. You have Purdue as the number 1 team in the country. You have Wisconsin up to 21. It's now getting into the top 25. Illinois is now a top 10 team, and you're going to play them all. And that doesn't include Michigan State, who will probably be ranked by the end of it. That doesn't include Ohio State, who is 11-2 and could probably be ranked with a couple of wins to start their Big Ten play. So this is a brutal schedule. It's a brutal conference. And when you look at, for me, the fifth most important game outside of all of them, because they're all important, I almost combine and look at, I kind of look at that game on the 27th of January when you're on the road at Illinois. And I already know how a lot of fans are going to feel about this. They're going to be not very, you're not going to be very confident, I feel like, in this game. You should be, but I think a lot of that has to do with the first 6 games before that, right? If the Hoosiers are playing well, winning some games, if you get an upset win over Purdue or Wisconsin, then yeah, you're probably feeling pretty good. But let's say you lose to Nebraska. Let's say you lose to Purdue by a lot, or you lose to Wisconsin, or you hopefully not, but let's say you lose to Rutgers or something like that. I mean, the vibes may not be high going into that Illinois game. But man, like we've talked about on this episode, so many opportunities for the Hoosiers to get big quality wins, quad one wins, ranked wins, whatever term you want to use. I mean, the Hoosiers have multiple chances to do that. And a lot of it's going to come down to matchups, right? A lot of it comes down to, how is Khalil Ware playing? How is Malik Reneau playing? How is Mackenzie Mbaka, who's only getting better, which is great to see, right? We're very excited, myself included, for that. How are those guys playing? How are they keeping up, right? What's the energy level of this team? They're not getting tired, right? They're not getting bogged down. They're not getting, you know what I'm saying? Like the things that happen in conference play, hopefully that's not happening, because, I mean, Purdue, Wisconsin on the road, and then Illinois on the road, that's one of the toughest 3-game stretches you're going to see in the country, in my opinion. That's 2 top 10 teams and another top 25 team, and 2 out of 3 of them are on the road. Like, find me other teams and other conferences that play a 3-game stretch like that in January. Luckily, it is in January, to where if it all goes downhill and you lose all 3 of them and they're kind of ugly, it's not the end of the world. You have time to recover, rather than that being early March and that be the taste that the committee has in their mouth when you try to get into the NCAA tournament. But I look at that game against Illinois on the 27th, mid-afternoon, and it's on the road. And man, if that game was in Bloomington, we'd feel a lot better about it, right? We'd feel a lot better if we had Hoosier fans there, rather than having to go on the road and take on a really, really good Illinois team. I don't know. I mean, that's just a really tough stretch. And I talked about one of those games is the Purdue game at home that I said was the most important game on the schedule. And I still believe that to be true when we think a number 1 Purdue team will be coming to Bloomington. But to kind of look into that 3-game stretch, you're wanting a win. I think that's probably the expectation, right? That's got to be what we should expect, and what we should be happy with if it happens, is get a win. And to be honest, I don't really care which one it is. We'd love it to be Purdue, right? We'd love to beat Purdue, but they're really good. Your best chance is probably that road game at Wisconsin. And then you have to play the road game at Illinois. You want a win. If you can do that and hold your own in the other ones, right? Play like you played Kansas. If you play those games like you did against the Jayhawks, you are going to win 1. Decent chance you win 2. And a close loss against any of those teams is fine with me. When it comes to this team and looking at the bigger picture, I'm not a fan of losses, and I'm not a subscriber to a good loss, but that's kind of what those would be if you're hanging in there. And I say hanging in, I'm saying within 10 points, especially on the road at Illinois. So lots of big games, lots of important games, man. And then just all the other games, the ones that you're supposed to win, right? On the road at Rutgers, home against Minnesota, Iowa, Penn State at home, Northwestern, like those games when you play at Maryland and at Minnesota, at Penn State, like you got to win the games you're supposed to. And a lot of those games, Indiana's going to be favored in. You've got to win those games that you're supposed to, that you'll be favored in, because of all the other games we've talked about in this episode. You've got to get the wins where you can take them, because those other games and these other teams that I've talked about, wins will not come easy. They're not going to come easy. And so, yeah, when you have Penn State on your home floor in early February, take care of business. When Iowa comes to town, they're not the Iowa of old. Take care of business. And when you go on the road to Columbus and take on Ohio State, yeah, it's a tough game, but those are what March Madness NCAA tournament teams do. They win those games. Are you confident in Indiana to do that right now? Guess that's up to you, right? It's up to you. I think they can do it. We know the talent's there. They just got to do it, which is why this Nebraska game to start is really, really intriguing. Lots of storylines going into it. Tomorrow, we'll have a full preview episode for you about that Nebraska game as we're getting back into Big Ten play. It's going to be exciting, man. I love college basketball. I love conference play, and the Big Ten is where it's at. I mean, it's the best conference of college basketball. I mean, just I don't see how you could argue that top to bottom. I mean, even with the surprises so far, this is a really good conference, and Indiana's going to have to hold their own. They're going to have to win some tough games if they want to make it to the NCAA tournament. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Again, Happy New Year to you and your family. Set those big goals. Go after those goals. If you write those down and go after them. We got some big goals here on Locked On Hoosiers this year in 2024, and I appreciate you starting your new year with us, and let's carry this all the way into 2025. If you're on audio, you can subscribe on there, turn on notifications. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. It's free. Just hit the button. It helps us out tremendously. Like the video as well, and we'll have a full preview episode of the Indiana and Nebraska game coming for you tomorrow, wherever you get your podcasts, and here on YouTube as well for Locked On Hoosiers. And so, until next time, Hoosier fans, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.